Marcus Lee had always believed in the power of art to tell stories, to connect people, and to inspire change. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, he had found solace in painting, a way to express emotions that words couldn't capture. His talent grew over the years, and so did his ambition. Marcus dreamed of seeing his work in galleries that celebrated creativity and authenticity. But breaking into the elite art world as a black artist proved to be a daunting challenge. One sunny afternoon, Marcus stood outside the imposing glass facade of the Victoria Gallery, clutching his portfolio tightly. Inside were his finest pieces, paintings that told stories of resilience, identity, and hope. The gallery was renowned for its exclusivity, showcasing only the most refined artists. Gaining a spot on its walls could launch a career overnight, and Marcus was determined to seize the opportunity. Taking a deep breath, he stepped through the gallery's heavy glass doors. A cold welcome. The interior of the Victoria Gallery was just as intimidating as its reputation: sleek marble floors, pristine white walls, and art pieces that screamed wealth and privilege. Marcus felt out of place, but he reminded himself that his work deserved to be here. He approached the receptionist, a young woman with a cool demeanor. "I have an appointment with Miss Sterling," Marcus said, his voice steady, despite the nerves twisting in his stomach. The receptionist glanced at him briefly before picking up the phone. After a short conversation, she gestured toward a hallway. "Her office is at the end," she said curtly. Marcus walked down the corridor, his footsteps echoing in the quiet space. When he entered the office, Victoria Sterling, the gallery's owner, was seated behind a glass desk. Everything about her, from her tailored suit to her sharp gaze, exuded an air of superiority. "Mr. Lee, is it?" she said, barely glancing up. "Let's see what you've brought." The mockery. Marcus placed his portfolio on the desk and carefully retrieved the first painting, a piece titled Unbroken Roots. It depicted a lone tree breaking through cracked concrete, its branches reaching toward a vibrant sky. The painting was bold, emotional, and deeply personal. Victoria rose from her chair and approached the painting. She examined it for a moment, her expression unreadable. Marcus watched her, his heart pounding in anticipation. Finally, she spoke. "It's colorful," she said, her tone laced with faint amusement. "But not exactly what we're looking for." Marcus frowned slightly. "I see. This piece represents resilience and hope. I thought its story might resonate with your audience." Victoria chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Our clientele isn't interested in stories, Mr. Lee. They want elegance, sophistication, pieces that complement their decor. This," she gestured toward the painting, "feels more amateurish. Emotional, but not refined." Marcus Lee had always believed in the power of art to tell stories, to connect people, and to inspire change. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, he had found solace in painting, a way to express emotions that words couldn't capture. His talent grew over the years, and so did his ambition. Marcus dreamed of seeing his work in galleries that celebrated creativity and authenticity. But breaking into the elite art world as a black artist proved to be a daunting challenge. One sunny afternoon, Marcus stood outside the imposing glass facade of the Victoria Gallery, clutching his portfolio tightly. Inside were his finest pieces, paintings that told stories of resilience, identity, and hope. The gallery was renowned for its exclusivity, showcasing only the most refined artists. Gaining a spot on its walls could launch a career overnight, and Marcus was determined to seize the opportunity. Taking a deep breath, he stepped through the gallery's heavy glass doors. A cold welcome. The interior of the Victoria Gallery was just as intimidating as its reputation: sleek marble floors, pristine white walls, and art pieces that screamed wealth and privilege. Marcus felt out of place, but he reminded himself that his work deserved to be here. He approached the receptionist, a young woman with a cool demeanor. "I have an appointment with Miss Sterling," Marcus said, his voice steady, despite the nerves twisting in his stomach. The receptionist glanced at him briefly before picking up the phone. After a short conversation, she gestured toward a hallway. "Her office is at the end," she said curtly. Marcus walked down the corridor, his footsteps echoing in the quiet space. When he entered the office, Victoria Sterling, the gallery's owner, was seated behind a glass desk. Everything about her, from her tailored suit to her sharp gaze, exuded an air of superiority. "Mr. Lee, is it?" she said, barely glancing up. "Let's see what you've brought." The mockery. Marcus placed his portfolio on the desk and carefully retrieved the first painting, a piece titled Unbroken Roots. It depicted a lone tree breaking through cracked concrete, its branches reaching toward a vibrant sky. The painting was bold, emotional, and deeply personal. Victoria rose from her chair and approached the painting. She examined it for a moment, her expression unreadable. Marcus watched her, his heart pounding in anticipation. Finally, she spoke. "It's colorful," she said, her tone laced with faint amusement. "But not exactly what we're looking for." Marcus frowned slightly. "I see. This piece represents resilience and hope. I thought its story might resonate with your audience." Victoria chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Our clientele isn't interested in stories, Mr. Lee. They want elegance, sophistication, pieces that complement their decor. This," she gestured toward the painting, "feels more amateurish. Emotional, but not refined." Marcus's chest tightened at the word amateurish, but he kept his composure. "Art is supposed to evoke emotion," he said carefully. "It's meant to connect with people." Victoria raised an eyebrow, her smile widening. "Art is also a business," she said bluntly. "My clients don't buy connections. They buy investments. Your work doesn't fit their aesthetic, or their standards." Marcus felt a wave of humiliation wash over him, but he refused to let it show. "Thank you for your time," he said quietly, reaching for his portfolio. Victoria returned to her desk, already dismissing him. "Best of luck, Mr. Lee. The art world isn't for everyone." The walk of shame. As Marcus stepped out of the gallery, the weight of rejection settled heavily on his shoulders. Victoria's words echoed in his mind, amateurish. Not suitable. Doesn't fit our standards. It wasn't just his art she had dismissed, it felt like she had dismissed him entirely. For a moment, he stood on the sidewalk, staring at the gallery's grand facade. Doubt crept into his mind. Maybe the art world wasn't meant for someone like him. Maybe his stories, his perspective, and his vision would never find a place in spaces like this. But then, a new thought emerged, a spark of defiance that pushed back against the shame. He clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "She doesn't see it now," Marcus muttered under his breath. "But one day, she'll regret underestimating me." With that, Marcus turned and walked away. He wasn't defeated. He was determined. The sting of rejection would not stop him, it would fuel him. The sting of rejection from the Victoria Gallery weighed heavily on Marcus Lee, but it didn't break him. If anything, it pushed him to dig deeper. Victoria Sterling's words, amateurish, not suitable, echoed in his mind, but instead of letting them define him, he used them as fuel. He would show the world his vision, and he would do it on his terms. Channeling frustration into art. Back in his small apartment, Marcus transformed his frustration into creativity. His studio, a cramped corner of his living room, became his sanctuary. The walls were soon covered in unfinished sketches and vibrant canvases, each one a reflection of his emotions. The rejection he had faced gave rise to a new wave of inspiration, and his work began to evolve. Marcus's latest series was deeply personal, telling stories of resilience, struggle, and identity. One painting, Fractured Chains, depicted hands breaking free from rusted shackles, symbolizing liberation and self-determination. Another, Rising Ashes, used fiery tones to portray a phoenix ascending from destruction, a metaphor for rebirth and perseverance. His pieces were bold, raw, and unapologetic. With each brushstroke, Marcus poured his soul into his art. The pain of rejection and the weight of societal expectations became the foundation of his work. He wasn't creating for galleries anymore, He was creating for himself and for anyone who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. Financial struggles. As Marcus pushed his artistic boundaries, the practical challenges of his life loomed large. His part-time job barely covered his rent and basic needs, leaving little for art supplies. He often stretched his materials to the limit, repurposing old canvases and mixing leftover paints. Nights of instant noodles and days of skipped meals became routine. The financial strain was compounded by a string of rejections from other galleries. Each time he submitted his work, the response was the same, polite but dismissive. Some cited his unconventional style, while others claimed his work didn't fit their clientele's preferences. But with every rejection, Marcus grew more determined. "I'm not giving up," he told himself. "Every no just gets me closer to the right yes." The opportunity. One evening, while scrolling through local events online, Marcus stumbled upon a flyer for a community art show. It wasn't a prestigious event, just a gathering of local artists showcasing their work in a neighborhood park, but it was an opportunity. Marcus knew that every chance to display his art, no matter how small, was a step forward. Determined to make the most of it, Marcus spent the next few days preparing. He selected several of his most powerful pieces, touching up details and ensuring they were ready to shine. On the day of the event, he borrowed a friend's van to transport his work and set up a modest booth under the shade of an old oak tree. The Community Art Show. The art show was vibrant and lively, filled with families, students, and art enthusiasts. Booths lined the park's winding paths, each one displaying unique and colorful works. Marcus's booth stood out, his paintings drawing attention with their bold colors and emotional depth. People stopped to admire his work, their expressions ranging from curiosity to awe. A young woman lingered in front of Fractured Chains, her eyes welling with tears. This feels like my story," she said softly. "Thank you for creating this." For Marcus, those moments of connection were priceless. These weren't wealthy collectors or gallery owners, they were everyday people who saw themselves in his art. Their reactions reminded him of why he painted, to tell stories that mattered, to touch lives, and to inspire change. A flicker of hope. As the day went on, Marcus began to feel a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in months. He sold several pieces, earning enough money to cover his expenses and buy new supplies. But more importantly, the positive feedback reignited his passion and determination. Late in the afternoon, as the crowd began to thin, Marcus noticed an older man standing a few feet away, studying his booth intently. The man, dressed in a tailored blazer, exuded quiet authority. Marcus felt a flicker of nervousness as the man approached. "Are you the artist behind these pieces?" the man asked, his voice calm but commanding. "Yes," Marcus replied, standing a little straighter. "I'm Marcus Lee." The man extended his hand. "Edward Garrison. I'm an art critic for the Art Vanguard. Your work caught my eye." Marcus froze, barely able to process the moment. Edward Garrison was a name he knew well, a respected critic with a reputation for championing underrepresented voices in the art world. "It's an honor to meet you," Marcus said, shaking his hand. Edward gestured toward Rising Ashes. "This piece, it's extraordinary. The emotion, the energy, it's unlike anything I've seen in years." Marcus felt a surge of pride. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. Edward spent nearly an hour at Marcus's booth, asking thoughtful questions about his inspirations and process. Before leaving, he purchased Fractured Chains and promised to feature Marcus in his next column. "Your work deserves to be seen," Edward said. "And I'm going to make sure it is." A turning point. That evening, as Marcus packed up his booth and drove home, he couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of hope. The community art show had been more than just an opportunity to showcase his work, it had been a turning point. For the first time in months, Marcus felt like his dreams were within reach. Little did he know, Edward Garrison's words would spark a chain of events that would change his life forever. The week following the community art show passed in a haze of routine for Marcus Lee. He returned to his studio, diving into new pieces while replaying his conversation with Edward Garrison in his mind. Though Marcus tried not to pin too much hope on the encounter, a part of him couldn't help but wonder if this could be the break he had been waiting for. Then, one morning, Marcus's phone buzzed with a flurry of notifications. Sleepily, he reached for it, only to find his inbox flooded with messages. Friends, acquaintances, and even strangers had sent him links to an article published in the Art Vanguard, one of the most respected voices in the art world. The headline read, "Marcus Lee, a bold new voice in contemporary art." The review that changed everything. Edward Garrison's review was nothing short of transformative. It wasn't just praise, it was a celebration of Marcus's talent and vision. Garrison described Marcus's work as a raw, unflinching exploration of identity, resilience, and hope. He highlighted specific pieces, such as Fractured Chains and Rising Ashes, calling them masterpieces of emotion and authenticity. Marcus Lee's art, Edward wrote, transcends the canvas. It is a conversation, a confrontation, a call to action. His work challenges the viewer to look deeper, not just at the art, but at themselves. In an industry that often prioritizes polish over passion, Marcus is a much-needed force of raw, unapologetic truth. The review concluded with a powerful statement: Marcus Lee is not just an artist, he is a movement. The art world would be remiss to ignore him, for his voice is one that will shape the future of contemporary art. Immediate impact. The response was overwhelming. Within hours, Marcus's social media accounts were flooded with messages from collectors, gallery owners, and journalists. People praised his work, shared the article, and clamored to see more of his art. For Marcus, it was surreal. After years of struggle and rejection, he was finally being seen. Among the flood of emails, one stood out, an invitation from the prestigious Turner Contemporary Gallery in New York. The gallery's curator had read Edward's review and was eager to host Marcus's first solo exhibition. "Your work is extraordinary," the email read. "We would be honored to showcase it." Marcus stared at the message in disbelief. Turner Contemporary wasn't just any gallery, it was a launching pad for the art world's most celebrated talents. The same artist who had been dismissed as amateurish by the Victoria Gallery was now being courted by one of the most respected institutions in the country. The solo exhibition. A month later, Marcus stood in the Grand Hall of Turner Contemporary, watching as visitors streamed in for the opening of his solo exhibition, titled Rising, The Art of Marcus Lee. The gallery was packed, the air buzzing with anticipation and excitement. Each painting told a story, a piece of Marcus's journey. Fractured Chains stood as a centerpiece, its powerful imagery drawing gasps from onlookers. Rising Ashes glowed in its corner, its fiery hues and intricate details commanding attention. New works, created in the weeks following the art show, completed the collection, each one showcasing Marcus's growth as an artist. Critics and collectors mingled, their conversations filled with admiration. "Marcus Lee's work is a triumph," one critic said. "It's not just art, it's a testament to the human spirit." For Marcus, the highlight of the evening came when Edward Garrison approached him, a glass of champagne in hand. "I told you," Edward said with a smile. "The world needed to see your work." Marcus smiled back, his gratitude evident. "Thank you for believing in me," he said. "I couldn't have done this without your support." Edward shook his head. "You could have. All I did was open the door, you walked through it." Global recognition. The success of the solo exhibition catapulted Marcus onto the global stage. His work was soon featured in galleries and museums around the world, from the Louvre in Paris to the National Gallery in Tokyo. Each exhibition drew massive crowds, eager to experience the raw emotion and authenticity that had become Marcus's signature. At auctions, his paintings fetched record-breaking sums, solidifying his status as one of the most sought-after contemporary artists. But for Marcus, the true reward wasn't the money or the fame, it was the connections. People from all walks of life approached him, sharing how his art had touched their hearts and inspired their journeys. A poetic revelation. One evening, while scrolling through articles about his latest exhibition, Marcus stumbled upon a headline that stopped him in his tracks. The Victoria Gallery faces financial trouble amid changing trends. The article detailed how the Victoria Gallery, once a symbol of exclusivity, had failed to adapt to the evolving art world. Its refusal to embrace diverse voices had alienated patrons and artists alike, leaving the gallery struggling to stay afloat. Rumors swirled that it was now up for sale. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. The same gallery that had rejected him was now on the verge of collapse, while he stood at the height of his career. It wasn't just poetic justice, it was an opportunity. He picked up his phone and called his business manager. "I want to know everything about the Victoria Gallery," he said. "If it's up for sale, I'm buying it." The news that the Victoria Gallery was struggling financially wasn't surprising to Marcus Lee. The gallery, once the epitome of exclusivity, had failed to adapt to the changing art world. Its elitist practices and outdated approach had alienated both artists and patrons. Now, with dwindling attendance and mounting debts, it was on the brink of closure. For Marcus, the gallery represented more than just a struggling business. It was a reminder of his rejection, a symbol of the barriers he had faced in the art world. When he learned it was up for sale, Marcus saw an opportunity. Buying the gallery wasn't just about business, it was about rewriting the narrative. The decision to buy. Marcus's business manager confirmed that the Victoria Gallery was on the market. The asking price was steep, but for Marcus, it wasn't about the money. It was about reclaiming a space that had once dismissed him and transforming it into something meaningful. "Let's make an offer," Marcus said, his voice calm but resolute. "I want this to happen." The idea of owning the Victoria Gallery stirred a mix of emotions in him: pride, determination, and a sense of poetic justice. But he knew this wasn't about revenge. It was about creating a platform where artists like him could thrive, free from the biases and limitations of traditional institutions. The negotiations. A week later, Marcus walked through the familiar glass doors of the Victoria Gallery. The space that had once felt cold and intimidating now seemed smaller, its grandeur diminished by empty walls and a lack of energy. Marcus felt no anger or bitterness, only a quiet sense of resolve. Victoria Sterling greeted him in her office, her polished appearance intact despite the strain visible in her eyes. Time and financial woes had taken their toll, but she still exuded an air of authority. To her, Marcus was just another potential buyer, a wealthy investor who could save her struggling gallery. "Mr. Lee," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for meeting with me. Please, have a seat." Marcus shook her hand and sat across from her, his demeanor professional but composed. "Thank you for taking the time to meet," he replied. Victoria began the meeting by outlining the gallery's history and its potential for revitalization. She spoke of its legacy, its once loyal clientele, and the prestige it had once held. But Marcus noticed something as she spoke: she didn't recognize him. The realization. As the conversation progressed, Marcus decided it was time to confront the past. "The gallery has a rich history," he said. "But I imagine you've turned away a lot of artists over the years. How do you decide who gets to showcase their work?" Victoria tilted her head slightly, her smile faltering. "Well," she said carefully, "we've always been very selective. Our reputation depends on curating only the finest talent." "Selective," Marcus echoed, leaning back in his chair. "Do you ever wonder if you might have turned away someone who went on to prove you wrong?" Victoria's smile froze. "I suppose it's possible," she said, her tone more guarded. "But we've always made decisions based on what aligns with our vision." Marcus leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Do you remember me, Miss Sterling?" Victoria frowned, confusion flickering across her face. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "Should I?" "You should," Marcus replied. "Years ago, I walked into this gallery with my portfolio, hoping for a chance to showcase my work. I showed you my paintings, pieces I poured my heart into, and you dismissed them. You said they were amateurish and didn't belong in a place like this." Victoria's face went pale, and her eyes widened as realization dawned. She stared at Marcus, her polished facade slipping. I didn't realize. You didn't, Marcus said calmly. But I remember every word. And I carried them with me, not as a weight, but as fuel. They pushed me to refine my craft, to grow, and to succeed. Victoria looked down, her hands trembling slightly as she fidgeted with her pen. Mr. Lee, I didn't mean to dismiss you like that. If I had known. Marcus raised a hand, cutting her off. I'm not here for an apology, he said. What's done is done. I'm here to buy the gallery. Let's finalize the deal. The closing. The rest of the meeting was brief and professional. Victoria, visibly shaken, outlined the terms of the sale while Marcus listened attentively. When the paperwork was complete, he signed the final documents, officially becoming the new owner of the Victoria Gallery. As Victoria handed him the keys, her expression was a mixture of regret and disbelief. I hope you'll be able to restore this place to its former glory, she said quietly. Marcus met her gaze, his voice steady but firm. It won't be the same gallery, he said. This place has the potential to be so much more. A new vision. As Marcus stood in the now empty main hall, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. The gallery that had once rejected him was now his to reshape. It wasn't about erasing the past, it was about transforming it. The Victoria Gallery was gone, and in its place, Marcus envisioned a space that celebrated diversity, creativity, and authenticity. This is just the beginning, Marcus thought, a quiet smile forming. The rejection he had once faced had been the foundation for his success, and now it would fuel the creation of something extraordinary. With the acquisition finalized, Marcus Lee wasted no time in beginning the transformation. The Victoria Gallery, once a symbol of rejection and exclusivity, was now his to reimagine. Marcus saw it not as a victory over those who had doubted him, but as an opportunity to create something greater, a space where art thrived, where stories mattered, and where voices that had been silenced could finally be heard. Rebranding as the Mosaic Gallery. The first step was rebranding. Marcus renamed the gallery the Mosaic Gallery, inspired by the idea that a mosaic's beauty lies in its diversity. Every piece, no matter how different or unconventional, contributed to the larger whole. This ethos would define the gallery's mission: to uplift underrepresented and emerging artists, and to foster an environment where creativity flourished without barriers. The physical transformation was just as dramatic. Gone were the cold, stark walls and minimalist decor that once screamed exclusivity. In their place, Marcus introduced vibrant murals, warm lighting, and communal spaces that invited visitors to linger and engage with the art. The gallery was no longer a fortress of elitism, it was a welcoming haven for creativity. A mission of inclusion. The Mosaic Gallery's mission was clear: to provide a platform for artists whose voices had been overlooked or dismissed. Marcus curated exhibitions that showcased diverse perspectives, highlighting the work of artists of color, women, LGBTQ+ creators, and others who had struggled to find representation. The inaugural exhibition, Voices Unbound, featured an eclectic mix of artists from around the world. A young Indigenous artist displayed a series of paintings that celebrated her community's traditions and resilience. A sculptor from an underserved urban community presented intricate works made from recycled materials, symbolizing rebirth and renewal. A self-taught photographer shared a collection of hauntingly beautiful black and white images, capturing moments of struggle and triumph. Marcus also included several of his own pieces, such as Fractured Chains and Rising Ashes. These works, which once represented his personal journey, now stood as symbols of the gallery's mission. The grand opening. The grand opening of the Mosaic Gallery was a night of celebration and connection. Invitations had gone out far and wide, not just to collectors and critics, but to local artists, students, and community leaders. The gallery buzzed with energy as visitors explored the space, their conversations filled with admiration and curiosity. Critics hailed the opening as groundbreaking. One prominent reviewer wrote, "The Mosaic Gallery is more than just a space for art, it's a movement." Marcus Lee has redefined what a gallery can be, turning it into a platform for empowerment and change. This is the future of the art world. For Marcus, the most rewarding moments came from the visitors who found themselves reflected in the art. A woman stood in front of fractured chains, with tears streaming down her face. "This," she said softly, "is my story." A celebrated institution. Under Marcus's leadership, the Mosaic Gallery quickly became a celebrated institution. Its exhibitions drew international attention, and its commitment to diversity inspired other galleries to rethink their practices. Marcus established mentorship programs and workshops, creating opportunities for aspiring artists to learn, grow, and find their voices. The gallery also became a center for community engagement. Marcus partnered with schools to bring art education to underserved neighborhoods, ensuring that the next generation of artists would have the tools and support they needed to succeed. Financially, the Mosaic Gallery thrived. Collectors eagerly supported its mission, and its reputation for showcasing meaningful, thought-provoking art drew visitors from across the globe. But for Marcus, the gallery's true success wasn't measured in sales, it was measured in the lives it touched. Reflection. One evening, long after the gallery had closed, Marcus stood alone in the main exhibition hall. The space was quiet now, illuminated only by the soft glow of the artwork on the walls. He walked slowly through the gallery, taking in the pieces that surrounded him. Each one was a testament to resilience, creativity, and the power of storytelling. He stopped in front of Rising Ashes and gazed at the painting that had come to symbolize his journey. He thought back to the day he had walked into the Victoria Gallery, hopeful and determined, only to be dismissed and humiliated. That rejection had been painful, but it had also been the catalyst for everything he had achieved. I needed that moment, Marcus thought. Without the rejection, he might never have pushed himself to create the work that had brought him here. Without the struggle, he might never have envisioned the Mosaic Gallery and its mission. As he turned off the lights and locked the doors, Marcus felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had taken a moment of pain and turned it into a legacy of empowerment and change. The Mosaic Gallery wasn't just a space for art, it was a platform for voices that deserved to be heard. And in that quiet moment, Marcus smiled, knowing that his journey had only just begun.